Welcome to the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee. And we have no members of the public here this morning. So this meeting is being held in person at the Health Centre and via audio-visual conference. All members participating via video conference will come for the purposes of meeting quorum in accordance with clause 25B of Schedule 7 to Local Government Act 2002. This meeting has been live streamed to Council's YouTube channel. So I think, Karen, I've introduced you to Kat, and so great to have everyone here, and we're full of confidence this morning. So I don't believe we have any apologies. So it's the data report there. So going on to A2, does anybody have any conflicts of interest this morning? And there's A3, there's no public participation, and A4, therefore no actions. Does anybody have any extraordinary business this morning? Right, so going on to A6, the minutes from the 11th of May. So are there any corrections that need to be addressed? Brenda?
Although Kat wasn't at the meeting, he's not actually listed on the meeting minutes, he's not.
That was when you did COVID.
Was.
And just want to write in your.
I'm not sure that non-sitting members need to have apologies.
Yeah. Even though it's how you pronounce it?
How is it? What's your
Not Karen. Brian, did you have anything you wanted to know?
No, I'm fine, thank you. It's just been ahead of me.
Yes, okay. So, I can have somebody to nominate a member to say the seat. Thank you. And the second one, and all in favour, please raise your hand. It's just right. So going on to the decision reports, we're looking at B1, which is setting fees and charges for the official information. Move to receive. Ready to receive the report. In a second, comment, and all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion's passed. Right. Would you like to speak to this report?
I can. So we have the ability under local government, the Information Act, to charge for information in certain circumstances. And we've kind of had an informal process in place, but we haven't ever put it in our fees and charges list. So we just wanted to formalise the fact that we can charge when and if we make a decision to charge. That's pretty much it. And it's within the recommendation from the Auditor General.
I thought it was quite interesting looking at the notes, the commentary around the media balancing it out.
Yeah.
So I know that District Council struggling with that because of the large number of media.
Yeah, for smaller councils, the impact of appointments and media inquiries can be more significant because we don't have the resources. We don't have dedicated employment team, for example. People do it as part of their usual jobs. So it does put on quite a bit of stress if we get an increase in employment rates over a particular issue or a particular time. Other work, we have to, under the legislation, respond within certain timeframes, and it can take a toll on people's other work because that has to be put aside to do this.
Does anybody else have any questions? Yes, Brenda.
So who determines if a request for information is employable, if that's such a word?
Yes, so me generally, if there's questions, Barb is pretty good on this. She's been on it for a long time, and she's got some really good test questions that she puts through. She says, are they asking for information? That's the critical thing. Are they asking for information? Because often people hide things and request that, that aren't requests necessarily for information, they're requests for something else. So she's pretty good at doing that. Technically, under the legislation, any information that's requested is a lagoina, whether it's a conversation, whether it's an email, whether it's mentions lagoina or not in the communications, it's still a lagoina.
Casting my mind back to the times that we've been lagoinaed.
Yeah.
I understand that perhaps when we're going through an annual plan or an LTP, that would be a busy time for the lagoina requests.
Yeah, so if we've got a consultation process or an engagement process underway, I don't treat information around those as appointments because that's a normal process where they've kind of said, here's something we would like some information back, or have you got questions? I don't treat that as an appointment. Okay. Treat that as part of the normal engagement or consultation process.
But still, I mean, that does add additional.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's work involved in that, without a doubt.
Because some people will, not necessarily in their submission, but they'll request information to support a submission they make.
Yeah.
And so that does happen.
Is there any way that we can try to reduce those events from happening?
Yeah, so we had a recent session with Untitled Chapter, who are council's leadership body that advises us. Simpson Gresson had a session on employments and the current legal state of employments, what best practice would look like, and we talked about how to reduce, and most, some really interesting tactics around making employments publicly available, for example. So if we start to see, I'd like us to have a place on our website where information that's been requested under Lagoina is available, so that we're not repeating ourselves 5 times. So if somebody's already Lagoina this, they can go to the website, it's already on our website. As much as possible, where the information is publicly available, we point the person to that public information. So it's only where you can't easily or it's not available publicly is where you get into Lagoina. We've got records that aren't digitised or meetings that, workshop information, for example.
Thank you.
Colin, you have a question?
Yes, thanks very much, Amanda, for putting all this together. And certainly, I see the reference to the Ministry of Justice there. The numbers of the Lagoinas, I saw them here somewhere in your report that they decreased from the first term of council here. So is there a pattern occurring there? Or
So we have put in a separate report just to give you an update on the rates of employment. So we did say that when I first started, I suggested that we do that quarterly. So this is the January, February, March quarter that I'm reporting on. We'll throw out the next one quite soon. But yes, they have decreased. And I think the period that we reported on previously included a period where rates were reset, and there was a lot of information requested around that rate setting process, and then as a consequence, a lot around financial spending questions came in. How would you spend the money? How did those decisions be made?
That's a separate report at the end.
Yeah.
So
they have
that's when you saw where I saw it, yeah. Sorry, I was just scanning through it and I couldn't find it.
It's a separate report.
It's the last report. Right, see, it shows you how thorough I read this.
That's good. Oh,
And maybe I'll just get a question, I couldn't see it in this, report. What about vexatious, reports? Is it a trick?
Yeah, so there's some best practice that Simpson Grayson and Untitled Chapter have recommended around that. And the biggest recommendation they make is a single point of contact for potentially people who repeatedly lagoon us on particular issues. And that makes a real difference. They can develop a relationship with someone. They can get on the end of the phone and ask questions. We can be transparent and respond to them quickly. And that's kind of the recommended best practice in that space. And Barb is very good at doing that. So she's got great relationships with some of our what I describe as regular customers. And you know, they've got her number and she will help, particularly if we're unclear about what they're asking, for example.
So nobody else is, sorry.
Could I just make a couple of comments? And on page 1 of the report, you've got the background information. On the second paragraph where it says it is proposed to be added to the council's schedule of fees and charges for 2022-23, could we just put in financial year in there to be included in the UPA, because it doesn't actually say what we're doing with it, we're just including it in the UPA, it doesn't say where we're including it. Yeah. Just you talk about the fees and charges, but you haven't actually, what I can't see is where you're stating what those fees and charges are. I can see that you've said under 2.2, the chief executive for the council previously addressed fees and charges, etc. And then based on the Ministry of Justice and Ombudsman guidelines, you're looking at a charge of $38 a half hour and then further down on it, it says every half hour after that it's going to be $38. Is that the actual fee that you're going to charge?
Yes.
Because I couldn't quite marry
Sorry,
that up.
apologies if it's not very clear. Yes. We just go with the recommended Ministry of Justice. Yeah.
And it's actually in the sample estimate of costs on page 58. So
Is
it's
it
the 38 half hour fee, first hour free, the 20% per page for the first 20 pages free for photocopies.
Yeah, I saw that. I just wanted to clarify that.
So those are the
Exactly
fees.
what- Yes. Thank you.
I was commenting about the addition of the court cases and decisions, so not court cases and decisions, the ombudsman. Fascinating, I think it gives you a very clear direction on that tone and
Yes.
how it's to be approached, and so
Yes.
no, it's a very good report.
Yeah.
Has no problems with it.
Amanda, on the fees and charges, discount applied to public interest hardship.
Whose side is that?
So it'll be between myself and probably Harry if I've got questions. When we spoke to Simpson Grayson, they were very clear that the current ombudsman is looking for more transparency and potentially not looking to charge. There have been a few examples where fees have been charged and he's reversed or made recommendations for those fees not be charged or a reduced fee be charged.
Well, they're going to be a hot topic.
Yeah.
But the general principle of this types of things, I guess it's straightforward, it's been mandated, but it's controversial, being one other price. So she make a recommendation to me, and I'll make that decision. So there's a one check, it's consistent.
Because in reality, how often do we actually?
We haven't charged in a very long time, but I think just the fact that we haven't got it set in our fees and charges in the annual plan was a bit of a prompt. I'm sure it was clear that we can charge under certain circumstances.
Just a question regarding members of Parliament. Do we have an approach, say that they may be charged, but as a council, have we got an opinion on that at the moment?
For members of Parliament, that's a good question. I haven't even considered it. There was a case with the Ombudsman where a councillor went into their own council and they were charged, and the Ombudsman was very clear, councillors should not be charged. So I would imagine.
Those are the ands, it says they may be charged.
Yeah. And the may is probably a good indicator, it's not a good idea. Unless there's a reason, you know, that we're talking about substantive collection of data.
So how far down the line does it go? What about community boards?
Yeah, they're elected members. Yeah, and it's part of your job, I see, you know, you should have transparent access to information, you shouldn't have to pay for it. That would be. Yeah, absolutely.
So are we going to get the fee structure? And
The fee structure is actually in the annual report fee structure, so this is the paper preempting the fact that you're going to get it in the annual fees. Annual plan fee structure. I'll get that.
No, well done. So nobody's got any big questions. I'd like to recommend that council adopt the proposed fees and charges for official information requests for the 2022-23 financial year.
I've got a question with regard to that. Is it, are we approving on behalf of council?
No,
Or
it's a recommendation to council.
does it actually say recommendation?
It says recommendation, recommend the council adopt.
Yeah, so it doesn't say recommendation to council to adopt.
They're recommending council adopt, just recommendation. So can I have a thank you. Second. Thank you. All in favour, say aye.
Aye. You can give raises then.
Jimmy, can you hear us okay? You're on the air.
I can't hear you guys properly. I can hear every pin drop and every cough. I can't hear all the words.
We did have this discussion last night, Madam Chair, and Jackie did say it was too cheap to buy new batteries for his hearing aid.
It's not easy to let public.
You'll keep.
So now, Amanda, you've got to.
It's okay, I'm okay.
Are you okay, Cameron? So Amanda does have another meeting, so she may disappear at the moment.
My team are in the meeting, so they'll carry them.
Madam Chair, in that case, we want to bring,
But we've just also got the Laboima, sorry, Madam Chair, we've got the Laboima report as well, but it's okay, let's just go.
I'm having
Well,
to
let's
shut
shut
down,
down.
it's no more.
Sure.
So we just, so policy governance report, so I'm going to propose that we bring item C2 forward. So we need to.
C2 and C. That's the official question.
Oh, C2 is. So firstly, I'd just like to receive the policy governance report. Can I have to move it for that? Read that and second and carry. All in favour, say aye. Jackie, raise your hand. Motion's passed. Thank you. Right, Amanda.
One comment, Amanda, that under number 2 on April, I think it's missing S in assess, which has led to.
Oh my God. Oh, you read it over and over and you think it's okay.
and while the view saying that, can I add that I think you've changed your title at the bottom of that page as well. You might like to amend that.
Oh, yeah, apologies.
Yeah.
It will be because we've cut and paste, apologies.
You're a busy girl.
Ah. So just a bit of an update on the strategic risk register. That's something we're working through. It's just going to take time. Hopefully we'll get, the goal is to get it to you by August, but it might be September, just depending on workload. Noting that we've got an election and that's also in my remit. The policy review table, so Steph has put together where she's at on each of the policies that are currently under review. We've put it in a table format with a RAG status this time to give you a bit of a picture of what's currently on the plate. For the next report, we'll also include the next upcoming ones. So Steph and I already had a conversation about the next ones off the rank kind of thing. The residents' perception survey has come in. We've got a draft and we'll report on that at the next bar as well. And we've just been doing some planning with some really clear goals around how we try and support both council and community boards and other committees. And noting that we've got an election coming up and we've got a whole lot of induction to prepare for incoming members, elected members. So yes, that's been the focus of our work over the last sort of 4 to 6 weeks.
So, questions for Amanda? Colin?
Just a quick one. Last week we were at Royal Provincial and Wellington Local Government New Zealand. We've got quite a comprehensive package.
Yes.
In terms of newly elected members and
Yes.
induction processes here. So
Yeah, so I've had a couple of meetings with the new person that's taken over the induction program at LGNZ. And her and I, well, Amy's leading that piece of work of preparing the induction. So Amy and I have been having some email exchanges and we've had a couple of Zoom meetings as well, just to make sure that we know what they're preparing, that we can line up our, you know, the stuff that's relevant for us with what's going on that they're arranging. Yeah, so it's logical and makes sense and not problem.
great.
Colin was also texting, emailing manager and the team, just letting know the dates.
Yes, yeah, we've got those.
So they've got those locked into people's calendars. Great.
So yeah, that's the other thing, is trying to put some stuff in the calendar in advance now, so that if people are wanting to stand, they've got a bit of a picture of what their first couple of months will look like, because that October, November, leading into early December period will be very, very busy. Getting council reset up. There's a whole lot of papers that you have to approve.
Excellent.
Questions, Alex?
Yeah, but fantastic that we're getting surety that these all being addressed. How far in your initial view of this were we behind? Yeah.
And the policy review,
Yeah.
significantly.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess you don't know until you start delving that down. You have a quick browse, look through your assessment, and then you, when you start looking into it in detail. So we made the call to review 3 policies for this that first tranche, to try and get those ones off the ground, because they were legislatively or audit requirements. And now we've ended up with 5 policies as a result of looking at 3 policies. And that's just because the way the policies have been structured hasn't been as robust as it could be. Things have changed over the last 2 to 5 years. Best practice is evolving. And you know, the policy resource that I think council has had in the past has been quite limited, and that shows. You know, I don't think it's not a criticism, it's just the nature of how much resource was dedicated to this piece of work.
In fact, we had a really good session last Friday with Brenda and myself, Steph, and Amanda. It was very productive. We've been through the policies before, and Karen some great suggestions. We're thinking of changing the name of both policies.
Yep.
And Karen's suggestions. I think it's really positive, probably a much smarter way to work rather than involving the whole team in a workshop.
I think it's fantastic, actually.
Can I ask, Kit, what are your thoughts on this as a risk advisor?
Well, that's what I wanted to hear, exactly what was said there, because I think it's been going on far too long. So really, it's a case of putting the past behind and tidying up the future.
Just a comment for you, Madam Chair. Steph and I have had a really good conversation about the process that we might apply, because we've got a lot of work ahead of us. So I think I might have mentioned Northland Regional Council have just completed a policy review process, and that's been commended by their council. And I talked to the person that was in charge of that process, and I said, how did you do it? What did you do? And he said it took them 18 months. So that's just a heads up. You know, it's not something we can just sit down in a few weeks and pile out a whole lot of policies. It's a process that we're going to need to go through. He said that they use good project management process around how they tackled it. So being really clear about who was responsible for what the timeframes were, how much work was involved. And speaking to what you just said, Madam Chair, around that having a little working group to look through the detail of policies, I think was a really good strategy. And you know, something to think about would be that we'd like to see a working draft developed initially to go to FAR, and then a working group set up to work on the detail of those policies, of that policy, and then come back to FAR for approval as a bit of a pitch for a process.
Yeah, and I think in my own view, I thought it was very well. I mean, I think you read it again, so I get you guys as well.
Yeah, I like it.
I think it was really productive.
I'm just backing Amber up there are something like 65 policy documents, and that's a loose term. Yeah, that's a lot of work to actually go through and cover. The other thing was that acts have been amended, yes, during those times as we actually found out through our workers together. So there is a lot of investigation that needs to be done. So yeah, it's not an easy, I'll just rubber stack that one and just move it through. Not a good look.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is it's not an edit of the previous documents. Like that's what we're currently finding is you can't just take the previous version and edit it, which I think has been a bit of a discussion about, you know, comparing two documents. It's not, you're not comparing apples and apples.
And I think that's a bit more one thing that we need to bring forward to is saying that it's not the same document.
From the feedback that we've had, I think all of the councillors who were involved in Friday, all quite happy to make recommendations. So,
Then just
great deal of the of the part of the city council.
just one other thing.
Yes.
Based on these meeting period of 6 weeks, does this reporting start to come through for progress?
If you, like, I'm open to reporting styles. Like, I think you guys are the readers. We should be writing for the readers. It was just a bit of a go to try and show you the progress across a number of pieces of work.
I don't think it's the key, showing some progress in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Just a quick one. Sorry, the target for these when they're completed, do they go back to start?
Oh, yes.
All these new policy, and then is that in the process, so they'll come back and say, this is not.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the subject matter experts or people that are responsible for the implementation parts of that policy, absolutely. So in this case, it's largely been Karen and Charlie because they've been financial policies. The delegations policy, the building team and the planning team had a huge amount of input because it's like all their regulatory requirements in the delegation space. So they basically do the hard graft alongside Steph, and then we bring it to FAR, and then absolutely there's a lot of backwards and forwards in, and then once it's signed off, this is the new policy we're operating under. If there's any procedures or processes that sit alongside those, they're now responsible for implementing those policies, those procedures.
I just think the skill level is much higher than what's sitting around the state.
And in fact, if I may, there's a lot of operational policies as well that springboard off the back of the government's policies.
Yeah. I've just got a couple of questions, Amanda. So, are you able to give us an indication of when the workshop on the strategic risk register might be? I see you delayed it to August, but
yeah, it's not on the calendar yet. Amy and I will have a conversation about that. I'm really conscious of your guys' workload, like council's workload, particularly noting that we've got an annual plan that's taken up a chunk of that. we're then going to go into annual reporting, and the stuff that you don't see is the election work that's happening at the same time, which you don't have an overview of. But there is, for example, we have to write a pre-election report that has to be done as well. So it's another chunky piece of document that we're responsible for writing. Aiming for August.
Okay, so that workshop, would you want the whole of to attend that workshop, or is it, again, would it be useful to have a smaller group who can report back, or
Open to suggestions.
what does everybody think about that? So this is the strategic risk register, and this is the last part meeting. So any thoughts on whether you want to have a smaller group or?
So I'm always of the view, if you've got a level of expertise within councillors, that have a keen understanding and interest in those particular areas, you know, I'm happy personally to accept the recommendation from that small working party to basically feedback into council or into farm. It's just, I guess I'm limited in terms of establishing or writing policy. I understand policy, I understand the functionality of it, but when it comes down to the level of detail, it's not my level of expertise.
So this is, we've struggled with the risk register for a long time, and myself, it was the chair of we wanted to get expenditures, and it's been the members say you're going to know Kit feels quite strongly about this. So whatever your recommendations, how you think it would work, but just the key thing for me is to progress story.
I think there's some benefit in having a diverse group of people around the table, because it's the critical questions. The workshop will be looking at the critical questions. You know, are the risks right? What are the mitigations that we should have in place? So that challenging critical question, critical thinking process will be really important in that. So having a diverse group around the table, not too small, I think is important.
All of those should be the initial one, just put in the way Amanda's explained it over the text. You're not going to get down into the nitty-gritty of the wording of it, which a smaller group can look at, but the overall, having an overall understanding of the risk policy and how it's going to progress and what it actually entails is, I think, the whole of that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. I think it was just worthwhile asking a question.
You might add value as well. So
just before we go on, there's just a couple of other questions I've got for you. So, just thinking about policy review. So I'm assuming some of this is operational, some of this is governance level, but HR policy, this is one question, dispute policies, that kind of thing, is that falling as operational policy that will sit under these other policies?
Part of the entire policy review process. It's part of the entire policy review process, because there are interdependencies that we need to factor in. We can't be independent of it. So there are certain delegations within HR processes that reside with certain people, and so yeah, it's all being done as part of the same. And there's quite a few new policies that's being written as well at an operational level that are recently been approved at ELT. So making sure we've got consistency and alignment across the board. So it's important that the audit looks good.
From a policy decision-making perspective, the governance policies are absolutely yours. HR ones are technically Harry's. What I've suggested is on our website, for example, we have our governance policies you can read them, they're transparent, but our employment policies, we have the titles. So that people know that we've got policies on those things, and that we're a good employer, because that's one of the things you look at when you want to come and work for council. Do you have policies about, for example, flexible working or those kinds of things? But the transparency of them, people need to know they're there, but they don't need to be public documents.
And so just reverting back to the pre-election work you're doing. So when is the briefing paper for new candidates going to be coming out? So what did you exceptionally good job last year?
So the briefing is on the 6th of July. There's a handbook that has been produced already. And we've got a conversation with Michelle and Karen to work out how we get that next step done.
I think what Chair was referring to is the pre-election briefing report.
Yeah, the pre-election report. Yeah.
And are we advertising yet around that? So it's like rather than
Around the candidate briefing, I believe so. Yeah, Sheila's just come back from leave this week. And of course, we've got quite a few comms issues on at the moment. So yeah, it's on our website. I know that for a fact. We can do so. I'll check it and just check.
Yes, I've just noted that Masterton and Carterton are doing quite a lot of work in that space.
The key is we'll be uplifting what the Chair will put in the annual plan. You know, so once we've got the annual plan, that's very substantively the information will carry as a pre-election briefing report. It's being finalised as we speak.
So Brendan, do you have another question?
Just with regards to like having a look at the risk register. Just think that we should be mindful that having an internal view, we could be potentially missing out on elements that are current, like the local government agencies that I've worked across NSD and DIA, they're using practices that we may not have thought about. So if we dip into that.
Absolutely. So if you go back a couple of meetings, I reported on that all of government risk framework assessment. So we absolutely are using that assessment. There's a lot of overlay with Council Mark as well, because that asks some really good critical questions about risk. And we've got a couple of Taitoa email chains where people in the same roles around New Zealand are often having questions and circulating shared policy. Yeah, just on my chat email. So it's easy for us to say, who else has got a strategic risk register? What's on your strategic risk register? How did you do the assessment? And we often share that. And we often compare with like councils, because it's all very well for us to look at Auckland Council's risk register, which we have done. It's quite an emergency risk register. There are some things that are standard, but you look at the other councils of a similar size and you have a bit of analysis. So absolutely, we're looking at both our current context for our district, but also the national and international risks that we're faced with.
So I think, thank you very much, Linda. That's great work you're doing. I think that's all.
There's the Lagoima report.
Of course it is.
My computer's gone to sleep.
And so I'd just like firstly receive the official information request topic trends report. Thank you, Colin. Second, I think agree with that. All in favour, say aye.
I know what it is. My computer's gone to sleep, so I can't open it. So I was talking to you.
She's a right
Oh,
dog,
yes,
so.
So, okay, so this is, basically you can see we've had about a drop off of about half in the space of the first 3 months of this year. So that's hopefully a good sign. It's hard to know. We also have had engagement processes during this period. So as I mentioned, we don't count the engagement as Lagoima. So if people have asked us questions during that the engagement process and plan, that's, there's been several, that's not counted in here. But yes, it's very similar to what has been in the past.
Just out of interest, the office expenditure related to the vehicle spotted outside council, is that the Lagoima
That was my first Lagoima. Yeah, so I think that was not long after the rates setting, and there was criticism or questions raised about how money was being spent. Are they getting good value? Residents want to know they're getting good value for their rates. So that one specifically asked who manufactured our furniture.
Mention.
I don't know that we knew the answer to that question. Because we purchased it from Works or similar, can't remember.
They could be interested to know whether it was
New Zealand
sustainable,
Aid,
Yes, no, they weren't.
It's value.
No, it's, what level of price break essentially.
Yeah.
Furniture, and it's all standard office works, desks, those types of things.
There was no design.
There's no, that's right.
And just in terms of when we respond to an employment request, we get feedback on whether or not the response we provided, or the information we provided back is satisfactory, or did we get any feedback?
That's a really good question. So quite often, Barb, who manages the actual responding and writing, and then she'll liaise with whoever might be the subject matter expert or would hold the information. She will sometimes go back to the requester and say, I'm not really sure what you're asking. There's a little bit of lack of clarity around, it might be a very broad request, for example, and it's quite hard to judge what exactly they would like to know. And you don't want to presume. So she does do quite a bit of backwards and forwards in. I think the indicator is whether or not they come back with a second appointment, which sometimes happens. So if we haven't quite hit the mark, we'll get a second appointment. But if we've done a good job of going back and asking, often it's very clear. They want the minutes of an XYZ meeting, or there's a paper that was mentioned in a meeting that isn't public. So that's quite clear. But if it's more broad, sometimes it can take a bit of backwards and forwards to hit the mark.
Sure.
But we very much want to absolutely, transparency is a high priority.
Yeah, sure, yeah. That's well accepted, and so that's how you measure it effectively. If somebody came back with a second request because they didn't quite have the know.
Yeah.
Obviously that's how you.
And we do have the occasional second request.
Yeah. No, thanks for that.
Any other questions, Amanda?
Good.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. That's very good.
Okay, thanks.
So we'll move back now to C1. Right, so we're back to now item C1, which is the financial report. So I'd like someone to nominate the secretary. And secretary, and Alex, all in favour? Aye. Right, so Charlie, hello Charlie, and Karen's here, so I'll leave it up to both of you how you want to manage speaking to this report. Bearing in mind that this is Karen's first council meeting and first bar meeting. So Karen, how do you want to go through this?
I've asked Charlie if she wouldn't mind, particularly since I've been here 2 weeks. So, Charlie, if you wouldn't mind delivering the report in a manner.
I thought you will reserve any questions Amanda Charlie's debrief us.
Morning, everyone. So this is quite a brief finance report. We have kept it to the core finances this month because we've been very busy with the annual plan. And the trends very much reflect previous months anyway. So as with the rest of the year, our main cause of our variance in our surplus are those unbudgeted government programs. So with those in is the top three little tables there, and you can see that our surplus is almost 50% above what was budgeted. But once you
Sorry, Tony, just one second.
Sorry, we're just going to pause for a second while we just sort out a few audio issues. Stop recording. Okay, so sorry, Charlie, to interrupt you.
sorry, I'll cover that last statement again. So without adjusting for those unbudgeted programs, our surplus is 49% above budget. But once you remove the net effect of those programs, the surplus is 31% above budget. And you can see there that mostly, so 513,000 of that is due to income being higher than budget, and 185,000 is due to expenses being lower than budget. So I think that's very reflective of our business managing their costs very effectively. That income, I'll just give you a quick little breakdown of that extra income that we've had. So building consent fees have been 261,000 higher than our budget. Waka Kotahi subsidies, the operating subsidy is 193 higher than budget. That is just mostly a timing issue on that one. So the program's ahead of its budgeted phasing. Resource consenting fees are 60,000 higher than budget, and rental income due to renegotiation of leases. I think I've mentioned this in a previous meeting that we've been very good with renegotiating our leases recently and getting much more market-based rates. So 58,000 higher than forecast.
Kelly, just while we're on that particular point, can I ask a question? How many more are up for review that will impact on?
I don't know the answer to that one, Lee, but we can put that as,
So,
if you'd like, we can.
We reported this too far last time, and so we're basically up to date with all the commercial leases. The next tranche are the community leases that we need to do. Yeah, so there's not many. I think we're 100% for commercial lease reviews. So if we get a comprehensive, but in terms of you'll recall that we've actually doubled the amount, increased the amount of rental income by almost $250,000 over the year. I mean, so it's significant. Yeah, all the community team work that
yeah, look, we had a breakdown of this at Assets and Services, and you know, it's down to the good work that Bryce has done over the last few years, and it's pretty sad to see Bryce go, but I think we're on track, and there's, as Bryce did mention, there are other leases that can be looked at. So yeah, great work.
Thank you. Sorry, Charlie, back to you.
Oh, that's all right. The operating expenditure, as I say, once you've taken out the effect of those government programs, is 185,000 under budget. So I'll just let those individual comments, individual areas speak for themselves, really. And then our non-operating income, so income for capital expenditure, that's another area that is above budget. The Waka Kotahi subsidy is ahead of the program. So And on 2.2, you can see how the operating surplus is adjusted for those one-off items.
It's good to see those special subsidies just highlighted in the sector.
And we will continue to do that for you, but some of those programs are obviously coming to an end. I don't know that there's much more in provincial growth. The New Zealand Library Partnership is coming to an end next week. So we might not have such an effect next year. Working capital is good. I know this is a rather accountant geeky thing to be excited about, but 4.1 is a very good ratio for our working capital. And investments, we've had no breaches in the since the last meeting of the thresholds. Is there any questions? Are there any questions?
How are we going with the IT management system software? So we get a single spent at work.
It just gets worse. Every time we turn over a rock, we're finding more problems with our. Yes, we are. So currently, apart from the operating system itself, we're finding things like backup systems. Because we have a disaster recovery as important. One of our systems actually backs up onto itself rather than having a separate location. So yeah, there's going to be quite a bit of work in the next year to actually resolve some of these very fundamental systems architecture issues.
And they can just count. Yeah. On that, and the risk this year, there is issues.
Yeah, so we'll be giving a call once we have all the information to hand. DLT had heads up on it last DLT meeting.
Yeah, awesome.
And so we'll be heads up on what that looks like, but it's certainly can be away from that.
Certainly if we can take the forward so we can escalate possibly over here.
Yeah.
From a hacking point of view, if something's working up on itself, then if somebody hacks the system, then we've lost everything.
It's a combination of things, Pam. It's so as you might recall, this risk of ransomware that happened to the ZHB. That's a slightly separate issue. This is just the ability of the system itself to operate and provide backup of the work we're doing every day. And without alarming people, the risk is that we had a major failure, we lose all data.
Yeah, we had, so we've got three storage servers basically within our main server. Out of those three, they are reaching their capacity in terms of life. They're supposed to be replaced every 4 to 5 years, and if one of them fails, then we can deal with that. If 2 of them fail, we'll lose everything, not just.
So it'll be front and centre of the next risk. But as I said, we're still looking at the bottom of it as we speak. It's literally reported and provider to scrutinise our systems architecture and our risk, and it's playing on as you do.
So just in terms of timing, when do you think might have a journey to resolve this?
This is going to be a plan. We're prioritising, we're putting in place a phased plan for development. The initial phase is to deal with 3 priority areas. Backup in the first instance, so things don't back up to themselves. The disaster recovery, because the offsite disaster recovery isn't cloud-based, it's server-based, and it's in Palmerston North. And then there's another one around 2-factor authentication, which is a security, more of a security issue. So those are the 3 immediate priority areas that we'll be looking at, and those are going to be looked at over the next 3 to 4 months.
Months, not weeks.
We're starting on it now, but this takes that long to actually.
We're trying to get the priority, so it's getting the whole picture.
Yes, very much. Yeah.
Is there a future job to actually move into the cloud?
Yeah,
So Mark's like Magic, our computer system, we've actually literally just signed off moving all that data into that cloud. Microsoft, cloud-based service.
So you're talking Office 365?
Yeah, Office 365. So those things we're doing, those are easy fixes. But it's actually the physical hardware and its end of life, its capacity, and how it's actually wired to provide backup into our systems. So the two things you look at is backup and then disaster recovery. So those are things.
And there is an information management component because we have about 12 terabytes of data, which is an immense amount. That we there's never been a cleansing exercise to actually say what do we need to keep hold of. As a consequence, we now need to projectise that piece of work to actually prioritise what we need to keep hold of. Some councils have taken a really radical approach, which I must admit I don't agree with, and that's just wipe the slate clean and start all over again. That fills me with lots of terror. So therefore we have to phase it, but we've got no choice. We're adopting an approach where we're backing everything up, and then we'll plan around what do we need to keep hold of. But that is a significant piece of work.
So depending on the type of backup system that you use, I mean, backup you either do a full or complete backups. I'm yet to find an organisation that's actually having an effective backup system. So
But let's just dive into the question. So we'll be coming back to what was actually.
I suppose my way around is that we're not going to be comfortable with this issue. No.
There's something to be said for hard copies, isn't there?
And then you have a fire.
Sorry, Karen,
I'm sorry, I was just going to add that someone else did it, Harry, that we are looking at putting Magix on the cloud in the next month or so, which I think eliminates some of that risk, because right now we use all of our financial reporting. So I'm about to get into that project as well as support for the bigger issue and the business continuity plan.
I just wonder, when you sit as councils, are we out of line, for example, with Marston and Catton, or sort of?
I don't know. I would suspect Marston was a lot more fast than we. I don't know where Catton sits.
I could just add to that. I met with Carson yesterday. They have offered sending lots of information, and I believe they're a little bit more way ahead of us, but they're happy to share some of the stuff.
They're happy to share.
They are very happy to share their good person who runs corporate services. They are ahead of us in terms of putting Magic on the cloud. Our two projects are running side by side, and they're providing some stuff already. So I think
Yes. Yeah, I said it's something smart.
that's right. Why we mitigate.
We're doing the work with Marston right now around digitisation of our files and those types of things. So because they've had the systems and processes and the staff all on board the project, so we can do more.
And that is entirely cloud-based. The problem we have, I guess, in summary, is that we're dealing with a household network in our systems architecture. That's the issue, and it's cheap and cheerful, and it's not fit for purpose.
It's not even cheerful.
Anyway, it's a funny face on my face every day, yes.
Harry, just some information is what's being said is really going to be nothing to majorly trivialities.
No, I mean, we've got the immediate actions in hand. It's really what we will show you is the whole picture, not just the end of this.
So, GP, I can see your hand waving.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Hey, look, I can't hear every word that's being spoken around there, so forgive me a bit if I might be jumping in, but I just want to ask Charlie on that public debt. Can you see that our interest rates are going to go up in the next 12 months, or is it capped?
No, our interest rates are likely to go up in the next 12 months. We've anticipated that for the purposes of the annual plan.
Yep.
And it's only on new lending that we're taking out that those interest rates will go up. We tend to lock in our borrowing for 5 to 10 years at a time. So
Yep.
we've still got some loans that are at sort of the high 1s and low 2s in the percentage. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. And the debt of 2 million, was that due to the offsetting of the rates last year? The increase in debt?
Increase in debt was planned in the long-term plan. We had some water projects that were to be debt funded. That's mostly what it was. And there was also a small amount for the furniture was always planned to be debt funded as well.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So on that interest that Judy's brought up, on page 10, we had a budget of 99,000, but we've actually received 202. Is that from higher returns on our investment?
We were very cautious with the long-term plan in terms of what rates we'd be getting on our investments, and we've managed to get quite a bit better recently.
I saw that ANZ were given 3.65 on 12 months. So that's the figures you're looking at the moment.
Even the really short term, so we quite often invest for things like 30-day terms just to put some money away before we know the bills will come in. We're managing to get sort of 0.6 and 0.7% on those, and that was the 1 year rate sort of when I started, really. So yeah, it has definitely improved.
Charlie, I just wanted to comment on the things that we've put under the water supply. The Wellington Water are forecasting a 7% overspend in the water supply area, which is a concern for us as a council going ahead. Their underspends under the wastewater and the stormwater. Is that because they aren't going to be able to get the work done in the budgeted year and that will need to carry forward? Do you know that? Or is that a better question? Sorry, it's just it must be 2.13.
Yep, I'm just having a look now. Yeah, I've just had to call up the Wellington Water dashboard for the month, and I'm just having a very quick scan through. So see if there's anything obvious. I can't see anything obvious at the moment, Pam, as to why they haven't made a comment as to why the underspends are what they are. I mean, I believe the dashboard goes to assets and services, but I could have a scan through and let the members of FAR know the answer to that question. Yeah.
That'd be lovely. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Now, JP or anybody else here, any further questions for Charlie?
Yeah, on the progress on the liquefaction investigation, it doesn't look like we're making a lot of progress there based on spend. Can you tell us how that's going? We have a budget of, so this is on page 6. Liquefaction modelling, we had a budget of 140, but we only spent 12. And I understand there's a statutory requirement for that to be done late last year.
So with the liquefaction, we're working can review, right? So it's not as a commissioning liquefaction review. We also had some additional work that was done by the Insurance Council, fortunately for our region, which looked at the cities as well. So there's work going on. So we're not pulling down our money until we know that there's some residual work we need to actually do.
Thank you. But the budget still looks like it's a great budget for that.
But we may go away to spend that.
So there could be some advantages to doing it through the district area to budgets and costs.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah. We get a reduction, it's not useful.
When the district bank has to look at the range of natural hazards like floods, liquefaction, earthquake risks, all those types of things.
Right, any other further questions? Great, thank you very much, Charlie, thank you, very good, thank you.
Thanks.
So, I think we can say goodbye to Charlie.
Yeah.
So just moving on to item C3, which is the action items report. So I'd like to receive, someone to nominate to receive the finance audit risk action items report. Thank you very much. The second, Alex, thank you. All in favour say aye. Aye. Raise your hand. Thank you. Motion carries. Right. Okay, so any comments regarding the, we needed a comment, GP? No. So any comments from anybody? I've got one on item 250, which is regarding policies, so maybe we just update that. Maybe state was Australian members of review policies, whether we need to do that.
What is the going on? So because you're going to receive the
Next week.
receive it and hopefully approve it and that's closed.
So, strategic risk management, we talked about. So, GP, in terms of the district plan and bringing forward the developer contributions, I know that you've given us a bit of an update, but have you got any idea what the timing around that might be, or what the general mood around the table with other councils is like for the developer contributions?
No, that really hasn't been discussed yet. We're just getting through the main chapters of what you can and can't do. There was a bit of a push going on to try and get the draft document out before the next elections, because under the terms of reference, the sitting commissioners will be replaced. So, you know, if there's commissioners on there that aren't standing or don't get re-elected, we have to go through the process again. We don't want to stall the project and have to rewind it. So we want to get the draft document out first, and then if there's a reset with commissioners, we take it from there. So the financial contribution bit hasn't been discussed, but I know it's on the agenda, but we'll just get the first bit done first.
Yeah, GP, on that, didn't we have a council resolution for continuity on that district plan review? We haven't.
We can't.
No.
That
was brought up, and we just received last week the terms of reference and the decision from the three councils, and no. Unfortunately, it would have been good if commissioners could have carried on through to, you know, this is going to take quite a while, this district plan, and the idea was not to try and have to reset it every time there was an election, but we'll see what happens after the election.
So technically we can't appoint it now, but you are able to, when the new council is formed, you will appoint people to various committees. If it's your blush to appoint the previous councillors, to that you can do that. Yeah, but right now you can't do that. You can't preempt it. You wait until the formation of the council. You got to remember too that new councillors,
there may not be a lot of them that are RMA commissioners, and the terms of reference require commissioners to actually sit on this committee. So if there's a new wave of councillors come in and none of them have got the accreditation, well, you have to wait until they get it, and that could take 3 to 6 months. So yeah, it'll be up for discussion on the new council anyway.
Going off the back of what you could just see a way of bridging the gap by retaining those people that are still here. No, do they have to be elected?
No.
Or appointed?
What I'm saying is the break right now is you can't preemptively put a waste sort of formation of the new council to then make those appointments. And if you're able to make external appointments to that, then you could use the standard. You can make that decision.
So I think that goes for quite a lot of appointments.
Well, in my case, because I'm not standing again, but if this council, the new council, want me to carry on it, they appoint me as a commissioner, not a councillor.
Yeah, that's right. So can I just make one correction to this action, because it has caused confusion. It's so it's about financial contributions, not developer contributions. So on at number 55, investigate whether a plan change relating to financial contributions, not developer contributions. Because there is the LGA, like Government Act, has an ability for councils to have developer contributions. The RMA has financial contributions. So you only progress financial contributions by a district plan change. We don't have developer contributions. We have financial contributions made by developers, but there's a technical term for development contribution, which we don't have. So I just, so we just need to clarify that, because it actually did cause confusion. Remember, we did have an appointment from a member of the public asking how many development contributions we have made. Because first I read this, and actually we don't have any. So that was the answer. But the question had been, do we have financial contributions? So then there would be a very different answer. So I think it's important to have this correct. There's just a substitute the word developer with the word financial contributions.
So would you take that?
Yeah, great. With the view of amending it to financial contributions, is there a delegation limit as to how much can be written on?
With respect to
Financial contributions.
Not quite sure if we're on the same page here.
Oh, well, I mean, we were talking about developer contributions, and in the past, developer contributions have been what's the word? Waived, yeah, amended. So is there a policy to that?
So that's usually that's the province of the commissioner who is actually hearing it. So a developer will submit to the commissioner saying, I would like this to be waived as part of the hearing process that actually occurs.
So in the instance of the orchards, development, the commissioner recommended that to council, we had no choice. So if you recall with this commissioner's recommendations, we don't have a chance to modify. We can either accept them in total or reject them or request another commissioner, but we can't trickle around it. So in that instance, it was recommended by the developer that green space contributions would be made.
That's the only.
But that causes a lot of angst within the community, so.
But it's not.
Yes, I know it's about any communicate that everyone, and that's what we're seeing against.
I think remember the reasoning was because the developer was going to make green space available. That's what the commissioner
They may make it available.
No, it was a requirement. That was carried in the commissioner's decision as a consent commission. So they were required to make the green space available as the requirement to provide financial contributions to green space.
So everybody is raised on this one to So that largely is taken out of our hands.
So that with hearing.
That's right, exactly. And we've had a couple of examples about hearings where you can't just pick and mix. Once you get the commissioner's report, and then you've just got to accept it.
All send it back.
Or send it back, yeah. Okay, so any other questions or comments? Right, I'd like to move on to D1, and I'd like to propose that this is publicly excluded, and this resolution is made in reliance on section 48, 1 of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987, and particular interests or interests protected by section 6 or section 7 of the Act would be prejudiced by holding relevant parts of the proceedings of the meeting. So I think take it as read. Can I have someone to move that we move into excluded? Thank you, Colin. Seconded. Thank you, Pam. All in favour? Aye. The motion is passed. So